There's a current Jaguar that personifies draft and development. His name is Parker Washington. I'll tell you exactly what that means on this episode.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast. I've covered the Jaguars professionally as a credentialed member of the media for 2 decades now, and I hope to give you the perspective as we head through training camp and towards the opener against the Carolina Panthers here at home. Shout out to the everydayers again for joining us and making us your first listen every day. We do not take for granted the 30 minutes that you spend with us each and every day. And if you're new here, I'll give you a reason to come hang out with us each and every day and make yourself an everydayer. Now, we got a lot to get into today. We're going to talk about Parker Washington and his development. But let me take you in reverse order of how we're going to do the show. I'm going to tell you why this all matters for the Jaguars as we move forward. We're probably getting into an area that is unseen and unheard of, where you're going to get a bunch of dudes that get re-signed, especially guys that weren't obvious top players who were picking at the top of the draft. In the middle, who else can learn from Parker Washington? Other players that can actually see what Parker Washington is doing and do the same thing. But we're going to start talking about the man of the hour, and we're going to talk about Parker Washington and what give you a little backdrop on him and how he was picked and all of that. He was picked in the 5th round a few years ago. He's now in his 3rd season. He has seen the Jacksonville Jaguars draft Brian Thomas Jr., sign Gabe Davis. Ooh. He's also now seen them draft Travis Hunter, give up future picks for Travis Hunter, as well as, even though he's going to play both ways, the Jaguars have made it very clear that he's going to be a contributor at wide receiver. And then they go out and get Dyami Brown. So if you're Parker Washington, who has grinded, who has done everything he could to get better, to prove and to show people that he is better than the 5th round pick where he was chosen. Well, you could quit if you're a guy like that. And I've seen it in the NFL, man. I've seen it in college. I've even seen it to a lesser degree in high school. And I know that's going way, way back. But the thing about it is, this is the thing that generally can happen to guys. In fact, he was a 6th round pick. Let me correct that. 6th round pick, the 185th selection in the 2023 draft. So I stand corrected. He's not a 5th round pick. And I ain't editing that either. I'm gonna leave it in there to show y'all that I'm human, because I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. But this is actually even making what I'm saying a little bit better in terms of his value and what he's doing. It'd be easy to quit. It'd be easy to quit. Every time you turn around, you bust your butt in the offseason, you improve. Everyone talks about how you improve. Coaches rave about your work ethic. You make big plays in the kicking game. Whenever your number is called, you make high point catches. It's just like the draft said, that folks said, okay, you're worthy of being picked, but only as a developmental prospect, but you ain't quite good enough for us to really depend on you. We'll see what we got, right? So you come out and you actually show that you're better than that 6th round pick. And then they continue to draft guys on top of you while they keep you on the team, and they're telling you, man, and they're bragging in the media about you, and everybody's talking about how your body looks and how you're strong and you're good in the offseason program. And then the team loses. You could easily sit there and say, had they played me more, they would have won. But you don't do that. You just stick your nose down and you go back and you grind again through the offseason. An offseason that saw them go out and get even more wide receivers in the draft as well as free agency, and then bring other guys in here. And you hear people like me talking about Joshua Cephas and all of these players. And you could then go Parker Washington. You could really hang your head. I'm not saying he hasn't had his moments. I don't know. I'm just saying we haven't seen it, and that's good. Contrary to what y'all believe, everything ain't meant to be put on social media. Everything ain't meant to be tweeted about, right? So you just keep your head down and you keep on working. And up jumps the boogie. You show out in the first preseason game And then you hear folks say this is exactly what he's been doing in practice. But somehow you are still number 4 on that depth chart because all people keep talking about is Brian Thomas Jr., understandably, Travis Hunter, understandably, and Dyami Brown, understandably. You could easily sit there and say, well, what gives? What gives? What else do I got to do, man, to get on the field? What else do I have to do to make these people believe and understand? Here's what happens. When you are actually doing stuff like that, you shouldn't expect people to understand. Whether they understand or not, you ain't doing it for validation. You're doing it just to keep chopping that tree down because that's what you're paid to do. And not only that, you're going to keep trying to prove people wrong. I'm not saying that Parker Washington didn't need to improve. I'm not saying he doesn't still need to continue to improve. He does. But the thing is I believe there's a whole bunch of people around the league collecting stats right now that he's better than, and he's not one of them. So what gives? What do we do about it? Realize what it is. It is what it is. That's what it is. And what it is now is he's the 4th receiver, chomping at the bit to be the 3rd receiver in what is a contract year for him, right? Because he was a late round pick. Here's how this is going to work. You're going to raise the floor of this team. This team should be winning games when a guy like Parker Washington is your number 4. He was number 4 last year, and they didn't know what the hell they were doing at the top. Like number 2, number 3 didn't know what they were doing, and the whole situation was bad. So once the situation and the structure and the organization and the alignment and the scheme improves, so should those players that they've put in front of Parker Washington. And he has to be ready because Travis Hunter is going to play a lot of defense, right? You never know how the injury is going to affect him having to go to the other side of the ball, and that's a luxury that they have. You also don't know if Brian Thomas Jr. is going to stay healthy. When your number's called, you have to be there. And here's a caveat. Dyami Brown is here on a 1-year deal for $10 million. If he plays like I think he's going to play, he's going to get at least $10 million moving forward. The Jaguars can then make a choice. Do we give Dyami Brown 3 more years at $42 million, which we could probably get away with because both of our other receivers are on rookie contracts, and Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr.? Or do we give that money to Parker Washington because we can't pay both of those guys? What do we do? Parker Washington is making himself a lot of money even though he's not on the field. You know how I know? Because it's exactly what Dyami Brown did when he was in Washington. He caught most of the balls in his career and got most of his yards and had most of his impact in the latter half of his very last year on the contract with Washington to get the $10 million that he got from Jacksonville. Parker Washington's going to get taken care of. You know what he's doing? He's controlling the controllable. He is putting his head down. He is continuing to work. He is shutting out the noise. And he is turning a lot of heads, and he is helping this team, whether y'all realize it or not, because of his presence and his competition and the team having confidence in him that if they call his number, he is going to be able to contribute without you worrying about whether or not he can do it or not. And I think that that means that he is good for Jacksonville. He is in a good spot for himself, and he's going to let everything take care of itself. And he is the epitome. If you look at player development and you sign Parker Washington's name right there. And once again, I got to give credit where credit is due. Trent Baalke is the one that picked Parker Washington, and I'm going to give him credit every time. I wanted him to go, and I'm glad he's gone, but that don't mean you didn't do everything. You didn't do everything wrong. And this is one of those things that I think he did pretty good. All right, who else can learn from Parker Washington? Who else is the dudes on this team that can get this all figured out and help the Jacksonville Jaguars? We're going to the linebacker core. I'm going to talk about the linebackers first and maybe mention 1 or 2 other players, secondary guys. We'll get to it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and my boys at Showtime and Playmakers, we're using Yahoo Fantasy for the 18th consecutive year. You ought to get in on it too, man. If it's your millionth time playing fantasy football and you haven't used Yahoo, then you ain't done it right. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/locked-on. Kicking the can down the road so we can have some progress here on Locked On Jaguars, as we're talking about player development and unsung dudes that have stepped up. We mentioned Parker Washington. I want to give him a salute, man, because it's hard to stay mentally engaged when things aren't going your way. It's a lesson to not only young people, but it's also one to old people. Yep, even unks can learn. Guys like me, you learn. You just got to keep grinding, man. Keep going and don't stop. And that's the thing about football. It kind of teaches us lessons that we can actually use every day in life. Like one day we're going to all be able to live in harmony without hatred and get along with each other and all of that stuff. I hope it happens, right? Sometimes, you can breed contempt in a locker room by feeling that you're not getting everything that you're putting in. And we don't see that with him. We don't see that with him. Like I said, I'm not sure that he ain't had some hard conversations. I don't want to sound like somebody who uses that phrase all the time. So let's say I'm not sure he hasn't had some tough conversations with family and friends. But whatever they did, whatever they talked about, if they've had those conversations, it still came out with him coming in with his head down, working his butt off, and that's all you ever hear. And that stuff is contagious, man. It is absolutely contagious. And there's a guy like that on every team. Every team that's successful, hopefully there's a whole bunch of them, right? And that's why we're getting to this. It can't be just Parker Washington. It has to be other people. And one of those positions that the Jaguars are actually sitting there and waiting. They are absolutely waiting for somebody to step up who has never stepped up before to the degree that they need to step up. They are absolutely waiting for somebody to do that, and linebacker is that position. Who might I be talking about? Devin, Lloyd, Chad, Muma, Ventrell Miller. All three of y'all. And yeah, I said three. I didn't say three. Shout out to my man Wyclef in the movie SHATTERS, who said three ways, right? All three of y'all. Somebody needs to step up, and maybe all of them will. Maybe all of them have felt the pressure. I tell you who looks like they understand it is Devin Lloyd. Devin Lloyd, if they had a Greek god contest, like who's physique, who looks like the scariest football players on the team, and I ain't talking about big dudes with big stomachs. They all look scary to a certain degree because they fall on you can't get up, right? I'm talking about Trayvon Walker, Josh Allen, those two right out of the gate, okay? I go Mason Smith, even though he's big, he ain't fat, right? And you 6'6" and 3. If you 6'6" and your first number is 3 and your second number ain't a 3, then you probably built correctly. So his second number is about 18, 1 and 8. He's one of them. But I tell you what, Devin Lloyd is right there, bro. Devin Lloyd, if you see Devin Lloyd, you ain't gonna want nothing to do with that. You like, he say, what you say is like, nothing, my bad. It's like that bike can be both ours. You can keep it at your house. That's what you're going to tell Devin Lloyd. Devin Lloyd is a freakazoid athlete. This scheme is built for guys like that to put it all together, though. I'm rooting for Devin Lloyd. He did not get his fifth-year option picked up, but there's a possibility. But once again, we're talking about a dude that was traded for and picked in the first round. So he doesn't quite fit the bill that I'm talking about dudes that you got late and that were kind of cheap. Can you add Chad Muma in there? He was a third-round pick. Yeah, we should have seen something out of him by now also. And to me, and I'm not a coach, and I didn't get this from anybody, because sometimes when you have access and you have credentials, you may say things to make yourself sound smart that you heard somewhere else. I don't practice that, and I didn't do it. Well, I do that sometimes, but I didn't do it in this case. All right? He hasn't shown me much, man. And to me, he's the odd dude. He's the odd dude. I never hear anybody mention his name. I never see him do anything spectacular. And there's a dude on the roster they just picked named Jack Kaiser. If Jack Kaiser is a threat to take anybody's job, I think it's Chad Moons. Here's my dude, Ventrell Miller. I gotta say it, another dude that was picked by Trent Baalke. Listen to me. Ventrell Miller is sudden. He's healthy now for the second year in a row, which that was the problem his first year and a half. He can play. He diagnoses things really, really quick to make up for his lack of size. He has a navigation system in his head, and his improvement in his health and his physical standing tells you what he's doing when the lights aren't on. In the offseason, when we're all talking about who they're going to pick in free agency and draft and looking at all of the future things, Ventrell Miller is another dude that, in my opinion, has kept that head down and has done a very, very good job. I think Ventrell Miller is a part of this team. I think he's part of the top 3 rotation at those inside linebacker spots. I really do. I'm going to give you another dude that has kept his head down and works hard, and I personally know his father, and I know the cloth that he's cut from. That is Yasir Abdullah, and we've seen him ascend to the first string on the depth chart at Sam linebacker when they are aligned like that. And there were some people going, 56, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Because they have negative connotations of what they think of people based on what has happened in the past that wasn't that person's fault. And I think Yasir Abdullah has been misused. I think he's been misevaluated. And I believe, just like Devin Lloyd, this is a system that actually uses Sam linebackers like this. If he had been here when Gus Bradley was coaching here and they needed, what's that dude's name that they called that? Otto. That's the Otto position. He's perfect for it. Part-time pass rusher, guy that can cover the flat, has the quicks to be able to make open field tackles, and he can stalemate any tight end that comes off that line of scrimmage and can take a block from a right tackle head on. Pure Sam linebacker. It's just that the league kind of got away from using those guys a whole bunch, right? So you had to find him at 6'1", 245-ish, 250, whatever it is. You had to find a way to be able to take this football player who may lack a measurable here and there and find out where and how you can use them effectively. Well, this is the system. Remember the thing I always say that Coach Phillips said, Wade Phillips, bum son. He said, if you got good football players and you can't find a way to use them in your system, you need to change your system. I'm not saying he's great. I'm not saying he's great enough that you change what it is that you do, but I am saying if you have a system in place already that allows for you to use a skill set of a dude like that, then he's your dude. They went out and got Gardeck, who's kind of the same guy, and then they drafted Jalen McLeod. So that tells you that they look and they take inventory and they say, look, this is a good football player, man. He might not have this and this, but you can always use people like that on your team and in special teams. Yasir Abdullah's another dude. Keeps his head down. He actually sent me a jersey too. He found out it was my birthday and sent me his number 56 to timestamp my 56th birthday. It was very, very nice of him. This ain't why I'm giving him credit, because if he messes up, I'm gonna come on right on here and call him out just like y'all. I do everybody else, and y'all know that. And he knows it, and his pops knows it. I met Mom too. Mom, they're gonna have to turn the podcast down when she's in the car if that happens, because I'm gonna be straight and I'm gonna always keep it real. But the thing is I think he's another player who has kept his head down, and now he's starting to see and reap the rewards for it. I think he's gonna be around the NFL for 8 to 10 years. And he's gonna do real well for himself because he works hard. And players like this seem to raise the floor of every team that they're on and always find a way to contribute. Especially, and you'll notice it more if the team is good. You won't notice it if they aren't very good. All right. Why does it all matter? We're going to get into the nuts and bolts of free agency and the economics of the NFL. And I'll tell you why these dudes are super, super, super important. Not singularly important standing alone, but important for the entire process of a team. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Monarch Money. That is correct. Listen to me, man. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k, properties, or investments. When you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal financial tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. Love that. And you can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Look, I linked all my accounts in Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. Canceling those alone saved me money every single month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use Locked On NFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half your first year off. That's right, 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code Locked On NFL. All right, moving and grooving. Talking about player development. Why is it so important? We've mentioned some players that have benefited from it. I'm gonna mention one more. That is Antonio Johnson from Texas A&M. Surprisingly, he's been in the mix in the top 4 at safety. And the only reason I say surprisingly is because last year, after a pretty decent rookie campaign, last year it seemed like he wasn't doing as good, right? Ironically, a lot of people didn't look like they were doing better when Ryan Nielsen was running the defense, but I digress. And the fans seemed to forget about him. You know who didn't forget about him? James Gladstone, when he took this roster over. Going to give him a chance. Going to give him an opportunity. He's on the roster. He was a late round pick. Guess what? Antonio Johnson, his body looks different. It looks like he's closer to 200 pounds than he's ever been because he's always been tall. He just looked real skinny. Looks like his lower body's a little bit stronger. Looks like he's playing more free and his mind is correct, right? I said one more I'm going to add too. Unfortunately, Monteric Buster Brown got hurt. But prior to him getting hurt, there was a 12, 13-year NFL veteran who played corner on the sideline who asked me who he was because he said he looks good. This defense fits him. Hopefully he can get back and continue, and he's not forgotten. He continued to get himself back in the mix, especially with Tyson Campbell being injured, which means Travis Hunter might have to play more defense. But back to these two young players. They're giving it their all, man, and that's all you can ask for. Johnson was even included in some promos this offseason. He's kind of featured in a couple of them when you're talking about some of the things that they were doing differently in the offseason. If they can get contributions from them, that speaks volume. Once again, we know who picked them. It was Trent Baalke. But here's the point. It is important because I'm not going to use the term a lot of people use. I may have even done it before and say cheap labor. That kind of doesn't sound good to me for certain reasons. So I'll just put it like this. These are players that when they were picked in a position and paid in those positions because there was the thought that they had something, but we need to see more. We need to see them get better. Let's take what they have and bring them in here and see if we can actually enhance that and then work on their weaknesses a little bit. And if they do, and boy, if they can contribute early, we got us something, right? So you get contributions from them. Hopefully with those contributions, it led to winning. If it didn't lead to winning, it could be a moot point only if those guys were just there because you didn't have anybody else. But if they learn from those experiences and they continue to develop and you get a coaching change and a switch and you get a GM that is easy to work with and everyone is aligned together and it's all about football and not about trying to prove yourself right. Well, then what happens is, now you get this dude that's playing like a day one guy, but you ain't paid him a whole bunch of money. Even on his second contract, you won't have to give him a whole bunch of money because the money you're giving him, and this is just the economics of the NFL, the money you're giving him, he's probably going to make in 1 year what he made in those first 3. So now The total amount of money he made in his first 3 years was probably $6-7 million if he's lucky, or 5. He's going to get that per year now for the next 3 or 4 years. That's generational money to a lot of people, and that's life-changing and life-altering money. But you still get that production. You get that experience. And usually at the start of a guy's second contract, he's 24, 25, 26 years old. So you get his prime production, familiarity in the system, as long as you don't keep changing coaches. Less stuff that you have to actually reteach and stuff that you can continue to build on. I used to give that example about building a house. I said, you get your foundation, but at some point you need to see elevation. You need to see a frame and a roof and windows and, and siding. These are the guys that provide the framework for your pretty siding that you're going to put up. And you ain't got to go back and demolish the house and start all over with your foundation again. The foundation of any football team are those late round picks, right? Those middle round picks to go along with your stars. Hopefully your stars are the dudes that you picked early or that you signed in free agency, but they can't win it alone. This ain't basketball. And even then you can't do it. It's easier, but football is 53 men and a practice squad. There's a chain reaction up and down that chain of command, and it all needs to connect. It all needs to be strong for this thing to move forward. This is almost taking you on a macro approach in 30 minutes to team building. They value this. Go back and look. Most of the teams, a lot of teams that won a lot of championships missed on first round picks, but they didn't miss on those middle round picks. Look at the Legion of Boom and go back and look at Bill Belichick with the Patriots. Look at the Baltimore Ravens. A team that sometimes trades out of the first round. And they keep hitting on these other picks. Hit on Mike Green this year for some different reasons, but they still did it. This is what I'm talking about, and this is why this is so important. And hopefully these guys continue to thrive here for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it makes the Jaguars' decision-making process a whole bunch easier when it comes to, okay, do we retain? Who do we keep? Keep Diami? What if Diami asks for 15 and we can't do that because Trevor's now in his extension and Trayvon's in his extension? What if we can't do that? And Parker's right there and he wants to stay here. And even though they have different skill sets, we can still operate in a certain way with Parker Washington at about a third of that money. And these are decisions that have to be made. And I know we're getting ahead of it, but you have to stay ahead of it if you're ever going to be a really good football team. And I think the Jaguars are heading in the right direction because of those dudes. Picked by Trent Baalke. Ain't that something? Well, thank you for making Locked On Jaguars your first listen today. NFL fantasy draft season is here. So for your second listen, go find the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast and host Vinny Iyer and Michelle Majuk. Listen every day to prep your fantasy draft or for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager so you can take home your league's trophy this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Thanks again for joining me, Tony Wiggins, here as we get closer and closer to the regular season. We're going to keep giving you all the things you need to hear. Now, after the second week, you're going to start seeing players getting cut and getting moved. So keep your eye on the things that we need to look forward to in this second preseason game, and I'll discuss that on the next episode of Locked On Jaguars. Until then, y'all make sure you take care of each other, take care of your community, love each other, man, and we'll see you next time.